Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION@CuandReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 9th of April 2025, from the news section. Ex-snooker champion Graham Dott accused of sexually abusing children. Report by Craig Williams. Former world snooker champion Graham Dott has been accused of sexually abusing children. The 47-year-old is facing charges of historic sex abuse against a boy and a girl. Court papers allege he abused the girl in Glasgow between 1993 and 1996, beginning when she was around 10. He is said to have told her to remove her clothing, exposed his genitals to her, and sexually assaulted her. He faces a second charge of sexually abusing a boy between 2006 and 2010 in locations in Lanarkshire, from when the child was aged around 7. Dott, who won the 2006 World Championship title, has been suspended by snooker's governing body, the World Professional Billiards and Snooker Association, WPBSA. A short statement on the WPBSA website read, Graham Dott has been suspended by the WPBSA due to a case which is scheduled to be heard before the High Court in Scotland. Whilst court proceedings are ongoing, it would be inappropriate for the WPBSA to make any further comment. Dott defeated Peter Ebdon to win the 2006 World Championship title in the Crucible in Sheffield. He also reached the final in both 2004, when he was beaten by Ronnie O'Sullivan, and in 2010, losing out to Australian Neil Robertson. Having turned professional in 1994, Dott has been a regular in the World Snooker Tour circuit. However, this season has seen him fall down the rankings to outside the world's top 50. Dott was set to enter this year's World Snooker Championship qualifiers in the second round against either Wang Yuchen or Brian Seeney on Friday. Given Dott has the right to appeal over his suspension by the WPBSA, he currently remains in a draw, the PA News Agency understands. But it is unlikely that process could be completed in time for him to play on Friday as scheduled. The case is due to call at the High Court in Glasgow in June. And that report was written by Craig Williams and read by me, Ian. From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 9th of April 2025, from the news section. Firefighters battle huge blaze at industrial estate. Report by Craig Williams. Firefighters are battling a huge blaze at an industrial estate. Emergency services are in attendance at the fire in West Byrehill Industrial Estate in Kilwinning. Video footage has captured large plumes of smoke billowing over the Byrehill Road area of the town near a new housing development. Loud banging sounds can also be heard, with some residents in nearby Stevenston describing the noise as like bombs going off. North Ayrshire Council posted on X, Byrehill Road in Kilwinning is closed due to an ongoing fire at a recycling centre in Byrehill Place. Emergency services are in attendance. There is significant travel disruption in and around the Kilwinning area. Please avoid this area if you can. Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, SFRS, is advising people in nearby houses to keep windows and doors closed. An SFRS spokesperson said, We are currently in attendance at a large fire within a recycling centre on Byrehill Place, Kilwinning. We have mobilised 6 fire appliances to the scene. There are no reports of any injuries. However, police have confirmed that several properties nearby have been evacuated as a precaution. A Police Scotland statement read, A cordon is in place and roads in the area have been closed. Diversions are in place and the public are advised that they should avoid this area at this time. North Ayrshire Council has opened Cranberry Moss Community Centre, Cambusdown Place, Kilwinning, KA136SL, as a rest centre to accommodate residents and others who are unable to access their properties. The fire appears to have started in the same area of Kilwinning as a massive blaze last year. Almost exactly 1 year ago, April the 8th, 2024, a multi-agency response was required following a fire impacting the Phoenix Battery Recycling Plant on Byrehill Place. Emergency crews remained in place at the scene for close to 4 days before being stood down. In an article written by Craig Williams and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 9th of April 2025, from the news section, Scottish Borders Council proposes mothballing nurseries. By Garrett Stell, education correspondent. A council is proposing to mothball 7 nurseries amidst complaints that parents are being shut out of the process. Papers for an upcoming Scottish Borders Council (SBC) Executive Committee meeting include reports on multiple nurseries under review: Gordon, Channelkirk, Brofton, Coldingham, Fountain Hall, Newcastleton, Glendinning, Walkerburn, Westrother, Yetholm, Goburn's Path and Ednam. Individual assessments on each nursery state that the proposal is to mothball the service for a period of 1 year and that the recommendation is to implement proposals with no amendments. However, the final report to the committee recommends that Coldingham, Broughton, Newcastleton and Gordon should remain open in 2025-26 due to a variety of factors. The remaining 7 settings are recommended for mothballing due to their enrolment. Channelkirk, Coburn's Path, Ednam, Fountain Hall, Walkerburn, Westrother and Yetholm each continue to operate at 50% or lower capacities. The travel from any of these to their nearest alternative provision ranges between 2 and 7 miles, which we consider to be an acceptable distance. Glendinning was listed as temporarily closed over safety concerns regarding a significant issue concerning fire escape was discovered. Parents at multiple nurseries have told the Herald they only learned that their setting was under consideration for mothballing when the council published its papers on Monday night, despite a draft council policy saying parents should be consulted before official proposals. The Schools Consultation Scotland Act 2010 governs the closure policies. Government guidance states that mothballing should only be considered when roll is at 0 or very low, and that it should not be used in a way to deprive parents of their right to consultation on closure. The SBC Executive Committee will review the nursery report on the 15th of April and consider the mothballing proposals. On 21st of April, after all other placements have been confirmed, the Council will launch a 3-week consultation for the affected nurseries. In response to the Council papers, parents at multiple nurseries have said they feel the consultation process has been arranged to guarantee closure and minimise parent voices. The Executive Committee papers also include a proposal to update the Council's mothballing policy to outline the mothballing process for early learning and childcare (ELC) settings. The draft policy states that parents should be informed of the potential for mothballing before proposals are presented to the committee. In March, a council education officer wrote to parents at Channelkirk. She informed them that the nursery was being reviewed, but that it was being done to determine if any nurseries should be made inactive next year. This refers to a specific care inspectorate status, and the officer was explicit that the review is not a mothballing exercise. The Scottish Government has previously stated that the care inspectorate's inactive status has no legal meaning, and that any inactive nursery should be treated as mothballed. Parents at other nurseries told the Herald they were unaware that their nursery was being considered for mothballing until the agenda papers were released on Monday. Paul Fulton, a parent at Channelkirk Nursery, one of the settings recommended for mothballing, said that changing the council's terminology does not change the reality for families. We feel this report vindicates our opinion that it has always been Scottish Border Council's intention to close our nursery, as well as many others across the region. If it were not for our interventions in the last few months, we believe we would not have even got this report, and it all would have been done behind closed doors, without scrutiny, using the Care Inspectorate in active status. Now we have forced them to hastily put together a mothballing policy. We believe their policy does not give parents, teachers and communities affected the adequate time to participate in the process. We do not feel the Council are even following their own mothballing policy, which states that they should be carried out consultation pre-report, which is also what the government guidance recommends. We call on our elected councillors to throw these recommendations out and ensure Scottish Borders Council conduct their next review into ELC provisions in an upfront and rigorous manner that involves communities being consulted at the very start of the process rather than after the recommendations have been made. Andrew Oldham, a parent at the nursery in Yetholm, said that he read about the Channelkirk situation in the Herald and was shocked to learn on Monday that the council's proposals also included his son's nursery. Another parent told the Herald the consultation proposals and lack of transparency in the process so far amounting to gaslighting parents in order to make it harder to voice opposition. Alice, a parent and chair of the Coburn's Path Parent Council, said the consultation programme will minimise parents' voices and that the mothballing of nurseries could have long-term impacts on associated rural primary schools. Parents haven't been informed directly of mothballing, only of delay to confirming placements. The school was told on the last day of term. The council meeting to discuss or ratify proposals on April the 15th is also during holidays. The timescales feel contrived to avoid including parent views. There is due to be a consultation period, but we have no trust in the sincerity of that review. SPC believe they aren't bound by consultation (schools) Act 2010, and their actions contravene every element of that provision to engage. She said that parents in her area could face travelling 1,000 miles every month to another nursery, with one of the alternative settings also at risk of mothballing. If alternative nursery placements continue into primary school, she said that it could threaten their small primary school's future. Christine Graham MSP said that she is disappointed that the council is moving ahead with proposals about which she and others have raised serious concerns. I had requested the leader of the council, Ewan Jarden, pause any decision as I await a response from the Scottish Government this week. He has not replied. If the mothballing goes ahead, it is essential that the correct processes are followed and that parents are consulted before any closures go ahead. It is clear from the guidance under the Education Scotland Act 2010 that mothballing must not be used to circumvent the stringent requirements under the Act for any closures, and, along with the Channelkirk parents who were right to be concerned from the outset, I will ensure that the guidance is followed to the letter. Joel Lamont MP has also been active in the parents' campaign and called the council's proposals and the potential threat to rural communities extremely concerning. These proposals should be dropped immediately. They have not been properly considered, and the lack of discussion with parents has been disappointing. The council must find alternative ways to save money, as these plans are simply unacceptable. We should be protecting rural services, not closing them down. A spokesperson for SPC said that the proposals do not reflect final decisions. The spokesperson said that the term inactive has been used interchangeably with mothballing in the council's annual review, but recognised that this has caused confusion for communities. This process should really be referred to as mothballing, they said. When asked if parents had a chance to voice their concerns ahead of the mothballing proposals, as outlined in the draft policy, the spokesperson said that the upcoming consultation will give them that opportunity. We have allowed a 3-week period for consultation and have taken account of the Easter holiday period. Therefore, the consultation period of 3 weeks takes place following this. We consider this is enough time and have allocated dedicated resource to ensure the timeframe is sufficient. The consultations will be carried out pending approval by the Executive Committee. The spokesperson also explained that the council currently has no mothballing policy covering nurseries, but is now proposing one because of an increase in the number of potentially affected settings this year. As the report states, the existing mothballing policy applies only to the mothballing of schools. The report is therefore seeking an addition to be made to that mothballing policy to add an appendix which relates specifically to mothballing of early learning setting. We have, however, followed a particular established operational practice for a number of years to assess the effectiveness of delivery of ELC for the following year, but that had not been formalised into a policy. However, due to the increased numbers of settings potentially affected this year, it became apparent we should formulate something more detailed. The policy was therefore drafted and is now being put forward for approval. It is important to understand that no decisions have been made, and that the report also recommends consultation with those within communities affected by the proposals before any decision is taken. In an article written by Garrett Stell and read by me, Ian.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 9th of April 2025, from the business section. Internships skyrocket as Orbex prepares for first flight. This article is by Christy Dorsey. Applications for internships have surged by 120% this year at Orbex as the Scottish rocket manufacturer prepares for its first launch in 2026. Ishbel Inkster, Chief People Officer at Orbex, said the company expects to decide within the next few weeks which of nearly 2,000 applicants will join the latest cohort of 9 interns as the company journeys towards liftoff. Last year, Orbex received just shy of 900 applications. She said it's great that a growing number of people are recognising the opportunities to work in Scotland's expanding space sector. We definitely started the process earlier this year, and that helps, Ms. Inkster said. We had a lot of people contact us to register their interest, so we already had a number of people on file as well. There is an increased interest in the space sector in Scotland, which is great, and I also like to think it's a little bit about Orbex and our own reputation. We have had a number of interns over the years. We keep in contact with them, and a lot of them come back and work for us once they have fully graduated. So we like to think that our reputation as an employer is growing too. The programme is open to undergraduate and postgraduate students with experience in mathematics, mechanical engineering, electronics engineering, space or aerospace. Roles include positions within assembly, integration and test, software, legal, avionics, ground segment software, and structures. The most popular position on offer was in mechanical engineering, which on its own attracted 500 applicants. Orbex Chief Executive Phil Chambers announced a major change of strategy in December when he revealed that the company had shelved plans to launch from its own spaceport in Sutherland and instead focus on the development of rockets designed specifically for launch from Saxavord Spaceport in Shetland. Orbex will have a dedicated launch pad at Saxavord with capacity to handle 10 flights annually. Orbex Prime is made at the company's headquarters in Murray, where it employs most of its 155 UK employees. There are a further 85 members of staff in Copenhagen, where the business originated in 2015. Following the decision to move our initial launch services to Saxavord Spaceport, we can confirm that the first test launch of Prime will take place next year in 2026, Mr. Chambers said. Our launch team is busy working on the infrastructure we need for our launch complex at Saxavord. the process for transporting our equipment and the rocket to Unst, and with the supply chain that will be helping us to achieve this. Matt Archer, Director of Launch at the UK Space Agency, said the strong interest in Orbeck's internship program speaks volumes about the exciting career opportunities in the space sector. Orbex is playing a key role in developing the skills and talent of the future, and this surge in applications shows just how much young people want to be part of that journey, he said. That article was by Christy Dorsey.
The Herald on the 11th of April in the Arts and Ed section. Charles Rennie Mackintosh watercolour to be sold at auction by Craig Williams. Watercolour painted by Charlie Rennie Mackintosh of a French village just 3 years before he died is being sold at auction valued at around £150,000. The design since 1860 auction by Lyon and Turnbull includes watercolours, cutlery and furniture designed by artist and architect Mackintosh, who died aged 60 in December 1928 in London, a year after returning from France. Mackintosh and his wife, artist Margaret MacDonald, moved from London to southwest France in 1923 for a cheaper lifestyle after a downturn in demand for work. The watercolour, titled Bulleterny, was painted in 1925 with sparing use of colour and depicts the hillside town. It's valued at between £100,000 and £150,000. Also included in the sale are two small paintings produced in 1901 when Mackintosh was first experimenting with watercolours. Brookweed and Pimpernel are both valued at between £15,000 and £20,000. The auction includes other items by Mackintosh, including cutlery valued at £20,000 to £30,000, which was commissioned in 1902 by Jesse and Fra Newberry, who also commissioned him to build Glasgow School of Art. A cabinet designed by Mackintosh for Scotland Street School in Glasgow in 1906 will be auctioned at between £4,000 and £6,000. The artworks will be sold live online and in Edinburgh on April 17, part of a Lyon and Turnbull's 2-day sale. Bulletinerne was acquired by Ronald W.B. Morris of Kilmacombe after a memorial exhibition of the couple's work at the McLennan Galleries in Glasgow in 1933 after the death of Margaret MacDonald Mackintosh. Morris was an executor of the estate a decade after the couple moved to the Pyrenees Orientales at Amelie-les-Bains in 1923. Encouraged to go to France by Scottish colourist J.D. Ferguson and his partner Margaret Morris, Mackintosh was drawn to the way the town's buildings had organically grown in a sloping hill with a small church at the top. In 1925, at the time Bulleterny was painted, Margaret wrote in a letter to artist and embroiderer Jesse Newberry, "The buildings here are a perpetual joy to us." The couple returned to the UK in 1929 when Mackintosh began suffering symptoms of cancer, and he was diagnosed in London and later died there. John Mackey, head of sale at Lyon and Turnbull, said, "This is an amazing watercolour. Beautifully preserved and wonderfully fresh, it shows a different side to a multi-talented man who mastered many different art forms during his relatively short lifetime." The paintings were part of a series of watercolours created in France towards the end of his life and are considered extremely important in terms of his artistic development and maturity. Also included in the sale are the two small paintings produced more than 2 decades earlier in 1901, where he was first experimenting with watercolours. As Mackintosh's biographer Roger Bilcliffe states, these works underscore his innovative approach to landscape painting and suggest a promising future as a painter, tragically curtailed by his untimely death from cancer in 1928. And that was by Craig Williams. The Herald on the 11th of April and the Voices section. Herald Diary by Lorne Jackson. Here's something useful Swinney could have brought back from New York. Count on Mum. The Scottish school system is the envy of the world, though the education provided by our native parents is equally invaluable. Reader Tom Fern was in a Chinese restaurant when he overheard a girl about 7 years old trying to impress her mum by showing off her counting skills. 17, 18, 19, chanted the wee mite. Very good, smiled Mum in between mouthfuls of fried rice. 10, 20, continued the girl. Excellent, said Mum, sipping her coke, and perhaps not entirely focusing on the little genius in her midst. Onwards counted the child, eventually reaching 28, 29, 2010. Aren't you doing well, noted Mum, forking Fu Young into her face and probably daydreaming of the proud day that her daughter graduates with a PhD in maths. Hard to swallow, another tale of questionable parenting. When reader Simon Gregg was a young lad, his mum plonked a plate on the table for his lunch. Not beans on toast again, grumbled Simon. No, it's toast on beans, corrected Mum, after I dropped it on the floor. Heading for failure, international news. Diary reader John Milholland notes that the First Minister, John Swinney, has returned from Tartan Week in New York. I wonder if he bought back surplus MAGA hats to use in his party's next election campaign, muses our correspondent. Make Alaba greet again. Going postal, a missive penned by a Scottish monarch is to go on public display in Edinburgh later this month, notes Robert Menzies, who is not overly impressed. I see we are finally getting to read a letter from King James VI, a mere 400 years after it was sent, shrugs our reader. You think as monarch he'd have been able to afford a first-class stamp. Bricking it. Here we go again. The diary is celebrating nominative determinism, that curious state of affairs when a person's profession and the name click together in sweet harmony, like a pair of Lego bricks. David Sears says, when I start working life in the civil service, I was in a team in a lofty tower near Whitehall in London. We were responsible for implementing the recent legislation, making it easier for landlords to charge more rent and to evict unruly tenants. My very nice boss was Mrs. Winkler. Fancy. This minded reader David Kennedy tells us he's just launched a new venture. I'm selling uncaged birds at $9.99 each, he says. They're flying off the shelves. And that was by Lorne Jackson. The Herald on the 11th of April and the letters section. The special relationship is dead. We must rebuild links with Europe. Alistair Majuri, letters April 9, argues that the UK economy has stayed resilient in the face of Brexit. This is to ignore the known fact that the economy has contracted since Brexit and will achieve around 4% less output annually for the foreseeable future. The hard cash figure is £100 billion a year. Mr. Majuri calls in aid of the CPTPP, Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, which the UK joined in 2024. By the UK government's own admission, it will contribute just 0.08% to UK GDP over 10 years. Who we have as our closest friends and closest trading partners matters far more than it did before Donald Trump's chaotic remodelling of long-established global trade arrangements. Mr. Trump has introduced instability to the global economy. We cannot be sure whether this is temporary or a permanent feature of how US wants to do business. We cannot risk hanging about to find out. Rebuilding our trading, employment, financial, educational and cultural connections with Europe is not now simply a matter of ideological preference, but of looking to our own best interests in terms of trade, jobs, defence, food security and long-term economic recovery. The USA has proven not to be as good a friend as we long thought. The special relationship is dead. Brexit left us isolated, less competitive and poorer. To not draw closer to the EU would be economically and politically illiterate and be a recipe for the continuing underachievement of the UK economy. Scotland deserves better. And that was by David Clark, Chair of the European Movement in Scotland, Edinburgh. Trump Show is a turn-off. The Trump Show continues with episode after relentless episode that we must all binge-watch whether we like it or not. Trump pauses on some tariffs, but his China as world trade war escalates. The Herald, April 10. It's wreaking havoc and uncertainty in its wake, and its central character explores just how far reality TV can stretch before the real world breaks. To understand what this show is all about, you need to comprehend the magnitude of its core narrative. What we are viewing is a leading man with an ego the size of the Grand Canyon, leaving the world by turns bemused, concerned and panicked as he seeks to govern the headlines. It is important, meanwhile, to remember that despite all the bravado, he doesn't know what he is doing. Peace deals are struck and instantly fall apart. Countries are told arrogantly that they will be taken over, but all this achieves is to unify all shades of opinion in those countries against him. Tariffs are used like bets in a game with the most serious of outcomes, but without a set of rules to play by. Surrounded by yes men, the central character is a star of a show with no boundaries of good judgment, norms of behaviour or respect. In tonight's episode, for example, the President of the United States bragged that world leaders were calling up and, as he put it, kissing my ass, trying to get a deal with the great man. And with so many of his throwaway lines, he revealed in this so much about himself and the way he is prepared to demean his office in stroking his own ego. Watching the second series of The Trump Show is a harsh reminder of just how bad things can get when personal responsibility, careful planning and dignity of the office are all treated as discretionary and inconvenient rather than essentials of good government. It is rumoured that a third series of this bad taste comedy of errors might be in development. We can only hope that America comes to its senses long before then. And that's by Keith Howell in West Linton. If Keir Starmer has any sense, he will suggest that Buckingham Palace organises a royal visit to the Commonwealth ally of Canada. Palace reception for the Canadian Premier would also be useful before the arrival of the American President. And that was by Andy McAdam in Air. Don't be misled by Farage. It is interesting, if not totally illogical, that William Loneski, letters April 11, expects the establishment which backed Nigel Farage and Brexit, and which now bankrolls Reform UK, to be on the edge of a kick up the backside with the Reform's arrival. If this is truly Mr. Loneski's aim, then he should consider arguing for a constitutional reform, which is the only reform that will significantly change the UK's failing democratic, economic and social structure. A structure which primarily serves the British establishment and its acolytes as the UK wealth gap disgracefully widens. Over the last decade, thousands of millionaires, many of whom backed Brexit, have left the UK and relocated overseas, while many more people who could not afford to change domicile have increasingly struggled financially. The UK's deplorable failings, with tragic consequences for the poorest and most vulnerable, will be grossly exacerbated should voters again be naively misled by the simplistic words barked by Donald Trump's smirking poodle in the UK. And that was by Stan Grodzinski in Longniddry. Immigrants and riches. William Loneski, letters April 10, said millions are voting for reform because Nigel Farage is an outstanding leader, and the party is not, as First Minister John Swinney suggests, racist far right. It is obvious to me that Mr. Loneski doesn't want immigrants in Scotland, despite the fact our NHS, agriculture and hospitality industries are crying out for more staff. Can he not appreciate what the people and cultures of India, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, Greece, Italy, France, Africa, Poland, Germany and many other places have brought to Scotland? No doubt he applauds, as we all do, what the Scots have achieved elsewhere in the world after being kicked out of their own country in the clearances and since. Imagine if they'd been refused entry. And that was by Andy Stenton in Glasgow. SNP policies are not free. Rebecca McQuillan gives a magnolia view of the SNP government's record. Next year's Scottish election could end up pleasing nobody. The Herald, April 10. On the debit side of her imaginary balance sheet, she rightly places falling NHS and educational standards, increased drug deaths, the ferries, and recycling debacles et al. On the credit side, she cites free school meals, the Scottish child payment, free bus travel for under 22s, free school meals, free prescriptions, free childcare, etc. Free baby boxes somehow omitted. When will she and others of a similar mind realise that there is no such thing as free? All these items have a cost to the public purse, and affordability appears to be the last thing the Scottish Government considers, if it considers it at all, before implementing these uncosted bribes to the electorate. And that was by Alan Ramage in Edinburgh. Universal Delight. Universal Studios clearly has great confidence in the UK's economic future, with its intention to build a big theme park in Bedfordshire. Government seals deal to bring first Universal theme park in Europe to UK, the Herald, April 9. That project has brought a welcome boost to Keir Starmer's flagging economic programme. It came as no surprise that he exploited this news on the major news channels. I'm sure that he must have breathed a heavy sigh of relief when the Universal Studios spokesman cited Britain as a safe place for such investment. The opening of that theme park may be 6 years down the line, but it injects hope in the path being followed by the Labour government to renew the economic growth of our country. Not only will it produce a large number of jobs, but it will also attract many tourists who might otherwise have decided to head to America to enjoy the thrills and spills awaiting them there. There was a mention that 80% of the jobs in the theme park would be filled by the local population, leaving 20% to be filled by people from outside. You have to wonder what jobs are contained in that fifth, and for whom those places are reserved. Perhaps there will soon be coming down the line further announcements of projects which will contribute to investment and growth for the British economy. Such news should brighten what has been so far a dark horizon for the PM and his Chancellor. In the midst of the maelstrom of the imposition of tariffs by Donald Trump to bring businesses back into the UK to alleviate the rip-off, he says, of the US by both friend and foe, will it enter the mind of the maestro of business deals that the creation of the new theme park could reduce the number of tourists flocking to the States to enjoy such powerfully attractive amenities when they will have one on their doorstep without having to take flights across the Atlantic? And that was by Dennis Bruce in Bishopbriggs. The Herald on the 11th of April and the Voices section. Sarwar fooling no one by pretending to be Scott's deal-making saviour, by Mark McGauchan. When President Trump announced on Wednesday that his administration's new tariffs would be suspended for 90 days, the world let out a sigh of relief and stock markets surged. The FTSE 100 was up around 5% within half an hour of opening yesterday morning, with other European and Asian markets making similar gains. One reading of President Trump's decision is that engagement with the White House by foreign delegations has worked. The other, more accurate reading is that the chaos in the markets and a global sell-off of US Treasury bonds spooked the White House and triggered a partial climb down. Nor is the relief in the UK really justified. Our new 10% tariff will remain in place, as will the 25% tariff on US imports of cars, one of the largest export sectors. British politicians have insisted that President Trump's behaviour in recent days has vindicated everything from the Prime Minister's softly approach to trade negotiations to Brexit. The Scottish Labour leader, Anna Sarwar, echoed Number 10's position last weekend, writing that a lower levy is a clear result of the careful and constructive approach being taken. Unfortunately, that's demonstrably false. The formula the White House has used to calculate the new tariffs was quickly sussed out and consequently ridiculed by economists. They took the value of the US trade deficit in goods with each of their trading partners, divided that by the total US goods imports from that country, and then divided that number by 2. If that number was less than 10%, as it was for the UK, they were hit with 10% tariffs anyway. As Dmitry Grozobinski, a trade consultant and author of Why Politicians Lie About Trade, put it, this formula is insane. The UK had ended up with the same tariffs on goods as Brazil, Australia and Afghanistan. I'm fairly sure that Afghanistan's rate is not a consequence of a Keir Starmer-esque approach to President Trump by the Taliban. Mr. Sarwar's broader argument is that the SNP government has neglected growth and repelled foreign investment, including from the US, and that as First Minister he would be a deal maker for Scotland, seeking to use President Trump's heritage to open doors. You can argue with the premise here. Scotland has seen record levels of foreign direct investment in recent years, with the most recent figures from professional services firm EY showing that foreign direct investment in Scotland was growing at double the rate of the UK as a whole. SNP First Ministers have routinely used foreign trips, including to New York's Tartan Week, which Mr. Sarwar attended last week, to advocate for investment in Scotland, both to politicians and business leaders, and where the Scottish Government uses its network of international offices to do likewise. They have been regularly criticised for both, with opposition parties accusing them of meddling in reserved issues. Ultimately, any Scottish First Minister has to engage with the rest of the world beyond the UK's borders. Foreign affairs are not an isolated policy area, but cover the international dimensions of every domestic policy issue, from economic growth and investment to education and healthcare. Even if this were not the case, Scots do expect the First Minister to champion Scotland on the world stage. In this much, Mr. Sarwar is right, even if he is somewhat pointing out the obvious. But the notion that he or the current First Minister, John Swinney, could leverage President Trump's heritage to do this more effectively is for the birds. There are two broad problems here. First of all, Mr. Sarwar wants to portray himself as a deal maker, much as President Trump does. The problem is that President Trump has never made a deal he hasn't then gone on to break. Take the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. The trade agreement negotiated by President Trump in his first term to replace the pre-existing North American Free Trade Agreement. While President Trump claims his tariffs on Canada and Mexico are justified under the National Security Exemption in USMCA, their legality under the deal is hotly contested, and they certainly undermine the spirit and intent of the agreement, harming economic relationships and integrated industries across North America. This is an unpredictable, often capricious president. Yet we know he has an affinity for Scotland on account of his mother hailing from Lewis, though the banner in Stornoway reading "Shame on you, Donald John" suggests that for many islanders the feeling is not mutual. This does not mean a Scottish First Minister could trust him to help Scotland secure greater investment from the US or to grant us preferential treatment. Moreover, President Trump is surrounded by a cabal of extreme authoritarian isolationists who do not want American investment going overseas and again cannot be trusted to engage with us on a level or good faith basis. The current US administration does not want allies, they want supplicants. The White House is acting more like an imperial China, treating other states as mere tributaries under its suzerain rule than the state that built the contemporary Western alliance system. What makes Mr. Sarwar's recent embrace of President Trump and his administration all the stranger is that this is not what the public wants. Recent polling by More in Common found that just 43% of Britons now see the US as an ally, with a majority backing retaliatory tariffs, including 51% of Scots. Even among more pro-Trump Reform UK voters, who Mr Samwa may be trying to woo back into the Labour fold ahead of next year's Holyrood elections, 43% back retaliatory tariffs. The public want to see our politicians put up a fight. As More in Commons focus groups have found, the public have an overwhelming disdain towards the notion that the UK might be a pushover. Recent Ipsos polling has found that just 25% of Brits think Sir Keir Starmer has done a good job handling the tariffs, perhaps because they sense that their supine response is not an effective way of handling relations with President Trump. If Mr Sarwar does become First Minister, the odds of which seem to be rapidly diminishing, then of course Scots will expect him to champion Scotland internationally. But they will also expect him to show strength amid a global trade war. And that was by Mark McGauchan. The Herald on the 11th of April and the Voices section. Untapped potential, Scottish universities need to do more with IP. And this is by Richard Gibbs. Scotland is fortunate to have an abundance of world-class higher education facilities within a relatively small geographic space. They innovate from almost every facet of their research, and as patent attorneys, we are privileged to receive advance notice of an array of world-changing technologies. We've helped protect everything from vaccines and medicines to engineering and software solutions from within the AI and energy sectors. While Scotland's research landscape is world-class, a recent European Patent Office report found that 45% of all UK university-derived European patent applications came from just 4 UK universities: Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial College and University College London. It is perhaps not surprising that these universities dominated the UK's higher education intellectual property, IP, landscape. But with a buoyant portfolio of world-class leading research, should Scotland's universities be pushing to maximise their IP potential? When it comes to filing patents or protecting a brand or a design, it's not always about wanting to monopolise a specific market. Take, for example, a new developed vaccine or medicine. The protection afforded by a robust patent portfolio is often the most important ways of ensuring that control over quality and safety remains with the original developer. However, when it's more than just money that drives the decision to pursue protection, IP is an essential part of the research funding cycle. IP attracts investment, investment drives research, and research generates IP. Therefore, without IP, research, which is inevitably cash-hungry, slows. So what is needed to ensure that our universities continue to leverage their IP to bring in investment? Scotland must focus on getting its inventions out of its universities and into a local spin-out network. Bo Hurst's 2023 Spotlight report on spin-outs highlighted that in the period between 2011 and 2023, Oxford University, Cambridge University, Imperial College London and UCL created a total of 548 spin-outs. The combined total of the 7 listed Scotland-based universities was much less than half that. But it's not just a numbers game. The focus needs to be on success and longevity, not the total number of startups a university can generate in a set period. By triaging innovations and conducting through diligence in the science, the data, the existing IP landscape and marketplace impact, Scotland's universities will continue to compete in the spin-out landscape. It's well established that a key driver of success is having the right people in the right positions. Success in innovation is no exception. Quality university research needs quality researchers and an entrepreneurial mindset to use the associated IP to drive the investment cycle. Therefore, we must not lose sight of the need to maintain a pipeline of the brightest and best students and teachers. All this comes at a time when our universities are facing financial and Brexit-related challenges. It's a perfect storm, but we must not allow these problems to erode our investment in the people that drive, generate and commercialise our innovations. And that's by Richard Gibbs.
From the Herald, Tuesday, 14th of April, 2025. Sports section. Petrov and Celtic contract silliness with Rodgers. By Anthony Brown, Press Association. Stilian Petrov believes Celtic's board will already have started working towards trying to extend Brendan Rodgers' contract. The 52-year-old Northern Irish man returned in the summer of 2023 for a second spell in charge of the Hoops, and his current deal expires at the end of next season. Rodgers oversaw a Premiership and Scottish Cup double last term, while he is closing in on a domestic treble this term, in addition to having reached the last 16 of the Champions League. Former Celtic midfielder Petrov, promoting Premier Sports Live coverage of Sunday's Scottish Cup semi-final against St Johnstone, said he's done a great job. I think it would be silly for the board not to continue with Brendan. So far, he hasn't given any reasons for the board or fans to think anything else. If the team finishes with a treble this year and a good European campaign, you have to look at that, and I'm sure that the board is looking into it because he's Celtic through and through. He's a great manager. He knows the club inside out. He knows the players as well now, and he's got the opportunity to add his own players if he feels that can help the team develop. Rodgers said on Friday he requires an injection of freshness to his squad this summer in order for Celtic to improve. It was really clever from a strong manager asking for players, said Petrov, who played for Celtic between 1999 and 2006. I think with the new format of European football, Brendan feels that if he had more quality, more good players, then he can do even more in European football. We all remember that when Brendan came to the club, he was talking about the European adventures, that he wanted to achieve a lot more with Celtic in Europe, so that will be his intention. I don't think he worries about domesticity. He has a strong team, good players, healthy squad, and he's quite happy with that. But I think with his comments, he tried to challenge the board, and now the board needs the answer. What they have to do is go and spend some money. I'm sure that Celtic will do that because what I've seen over the year, the recruitment has been really good. The development of players has been great. That article was by Anthony Brown. From the Herald, Tuesday, 15th of April, 2025. Sports section. Premier League boss will only return when ready after pneumonia diagnosis. By Herald Sports Online. Newcastle United coach Eddie Howe will only return to the helm when he is fully ready, assistant Jason Tindall has said. The Magpies confirmed on Monday evening that 47-year-old Howe had been diagnosed with pneumonia after being admitted to hospital on Friday. He will miss the key Premier League fixtures against Crystal Palace on Wednesday and Aston Villa at the weekend. Speaking at his press conference on Tuesday morning, Tindall said, "We had minimal dialogue together since that announcement. He's in the best possible hands and he'll be back as soon as he feels he's ready to come back 100% to lead the team." Asked if Howe's situation had put football into perspective, Tindall, who along with coach Graham Jones will take charge of at least the next 2 games, added, "Of course. As we know, your health is the most important thing, and that's why it's so important that when Eddie does decide to come back, he comes back and is able to lead the team as we know he does, day in, day out, and he's fully recovered. I'm sure he will do." No time frame has been established for Howe's return, and with the Magpies sitting a point behind third place Nottingham Forest, with 7 games remaining, Tindall could find himself at the helm for a significant and crucial period. Asked what role Howe might play, he said, "For the manager not to be here, he's obviously poorly in hospital. And the same as last week, we had almost minimal contact in terms of preparations. But we know the expectations and demands that we put on each other and ourselves each and every day. And it's going to have to remain that way until the manager is back. But we do know what we need to do. We know how to prepare. We need to prepare right and to make sure we can go and deliver performances, as I said at the weekend, that the manager would be proud of. It's part of my job, and I'll do the best I possibly can in his absence. We've worked together for 17 years, so we know what is expected of each other, and hopefully I can deliver the same messages as he would want." That article was by Herald Sports Online. From the Herald, Tuesday, 15th of April 2025, Sports section. Lucy Grieve has navigated highs and lows to become of GB's best. By Susan Eaglestaff, sports writer. Lucy Grieve can remember the exact moment she realised she might just be more talented than most in the water. As a 12-year-old, Grieve reached the B final of the Scottish Short Course Swimming Championships, and given she was competing with and beating fully grown women, it suddenly dawned on her that swimming may be a more realistic career than she had ever contemplated. I was only at those Scottish Championships because my club, South Ayrshire, needed a relay swimmer, so they chose me to be part of the relay team, Grieve, now 21, recalls. To swim in the relay, you had to swim an individual event, so I was chucked into the 50 metres butterfly. Swam really well in the heats, and then the way it worked out with some people pulling out, I ended up in the B final. I was this little girl swimming against grown-ups. I set the Scottish record for 12-year-olds for the 50 metre butterfly, and that's when I thought, wow, maybe this could be something. Grieve progressed impressively as a junior, and having been part of GB's team for the European Junior Championships in 2021, it appeared her transition into the senior ranks would be seamless. This, however, would not have been further from the truth, and in reality the year after her junior GB appearance was the hardest year of her life. I just tried to do too much, Grieve says of 2022. I wanted to study dentistry at university, so I was doing my advanced hires at school, I was trying to have a social life, and I was trying to swim. And nothing went well. I didn't get into dentistry at uni, I missed the Commonwealth Games team, so it was a very hard year, because those were the two massive things that I wanted, and I didn't get either of them. I really struggled with that. By the end of 2022, I felt horrendous. I remember around Christmas time, bawling my eyes out to my mum and telling her I didn't think I was cut out for this. It was an important lesson for me, though, because it showed me that you can't have it all, at least not the way that I wanted to have it all. After such a demoralising and disheartening year, few would have blamed Grieve had she considered hanging up her goggles for good. However, it's just as well she decided to give things one last go. And in the 2 years since Grieve had established herself, not only as one of the best current Scottish butterfly swimmers, but one of the best of all time, alongside her friend and Stirling University training partner, Kiana McInnes. Grieve is currently joint fastest ever in the Scottish all-time list in the 50 metres butterfly, and second fastest ever in the 100 metres butterfly, so it comes as something of a surprise to hear that the Ayrshire native still has trouble believing in herself and her ability, although with this humility comes several positives. Growing up, I never viewed myself as being very good, and I was always bad for not fully believing in myself. But the upside of this was I never put too much pressure on myself, she says. To me, swimming always just felt like a game. As a junior, me and another girl used to take the Scottish record from each other every few months, so it felt just like a fun game and trying to get the record back from her rather than feeling under pressure to succeed. I probably still don't believe in myself as much as I should, so even though there's many things I'd love to achieve in swimming, I don't put too much pressure on myself because I don't expect these huge things to happen. In the past 12 months, Grieve has established herself as more than capable of competing on the international stage, with her selection for last summer's European Championships marking her senior GB debut. And having had a taste of a major championship, she's keen for more. This summer's major meet is the World Championships in Singapore in July, and for Grieve to make it into the GB team, she knows she's going to have to produce the performance of a lifetime at this week's British Swimming Championships, which begin today in London. I'm looking forward to the British Champs. This time to qualify for the World Champs is crazy fast. So the way I'm looking at it this week, I just want to swim well, and I'd love to swim a personal best, she says. Scottish record is 57.9 seconds, so to get close to that would be amazing. But panicking about making a team isn't going to change anything. I just want to focus on swimming fast, and if that means I go to the Worlds in the summer, then even better. Also worth looking out for over the next 6 days from a Scottish perspective is Duncan Scott, who's already secured selection for this summer's World Championship courtesy of his silver medal in the 200 metres at last year's Olympic Games. Who will be swimming the 200 metres free, 200 metres fly and 200 metres? Cathy Shanahan, who will be swimming the 100 metres and 200 metre backstroke and 200 metres. Kathleen Dawson in the 50 metres and 100 metres backstroke, and Lucy Hope in the 100 metres and 200 metres freestyle. Also in action will be Olympic medalists Tom Dean, Freya Anderson, Ben Proud and James Guy. However, three-time Olympic champion Adam Peaty will be missing. That article was by Susan Eaglestaff. From the Herald, Tuesday, 14th of April, 2025. Sports section. Rory McIlroy fulfills destiny with Masters win for the ages, by Nick Roger, golf correspondent. Well, have you emerged from behind the couch yet? Come on, out you come, and you can stop peering through your fingers too. Rory McIlroy did win the Masters and the career Grand Slam. Read that back again if you want. It's finally happened. It was some old Sunday at Augusta. At times the ride was so excessively turbulent, I was half expecting an official announcement informing us to adopt the blooming brace position. Given the ridiculous number of ups and downs, twists, turns, thrills and spills during a quite absorbing, occasionally absurd spectacle. I reckon the golfing gods had consumed the drinks trolley and were drunk with mischief as they teased and tormented all and sundry with their outrageous meddlings. As proceedings roared to a fascinating, flabbergasting finale, you probably needed the shovel, great fistfuls of Kendal mint cake down your thrapple, just to sustain yourself through the emotional, exhausting, euphoric tumult. Nothing is straightforward with Rory, is it? If he was going to win, he was going to win in the most mind-mangling way possible, and he was going to burl us all through the metaphorical hand-cranked mangle with him. Vulnerability and sheer genius is a heady old mix. Take his third shot, for instance, on the 13th from a mere 85 yards, which found the water. But his second shot for the ages on the 15th from 205 yards rolled to within 5 feet of the hole. What a ridiculous game this is. After all the major anguish, the near misses, sucker punches and meltdowns, McIlroy finally savoured the ultimate moment of catharsis on the 18th green in the playoff, and sobbed so hard into the turf he just about left a few pitch marks. It will be another of golf's enduring iconic images from one of the game's greatest days. Those sobs may have been full of the what-ifs, maybes, and what might have beens of major championships past, and the questions and doubts that had built up during that 11-year major drought. This wasn't just a victory, it was an exorcism. The game of golf was a winner too. This success resonated well beyond its boundaries. With the exception of Tiger Woods, McIlroy is probably the only golfer to have this far-reaching appeal. In valiant defeat, meanwhile, the magnanimity of Justin Rose underlines golf's wonderful spirit. Following a Super Saturday which teed up a mouth-watering final round, Masters Sunday, by all giddy accounts, was going to be the best ever. As those golfing deities linked hands, the stars aligned. The lightning crackled, and everybody in the ground was reduced to crawling around on all fours in a pandemonium of worship at the prospect of what they were about to receive. Being the pessimist that I am, I was actually pessimistic about my ability to type the word pessimist correctly just there. I had a nagging feeling that the whole thing would be a crushing anticlimax and Corey Connors would slip into the green jacket. No disrespect to Connors, of course. As an increasingly excitable world grows ever more unhinged and hysterical, it's almost impossible for such occasions to live up to the panting levels of expectation. But my goodness, Masters Sunday lived up to those expectations and some. Things move along quickly in this game, of course. You've only got a month to wait before the next chapter, the US PGA Championship at Quail Hollow. The North Carolina venue is one of McIlroy's happy hunting grounds. He won a quartet of PGA Tour titles there, after all. 4 weeks later, there is a US Open at Oakmont, a venue that should play into his strengths, before the bandwagon rumbles into McIlroy's own backyard of Royal Portrush for the Open. He'll be carried to the first tee there on a gold sedan chair. Already fervent observers are working themselves into a fankle about McIlroy can go on to achieve this season, as they excitedly mull over the prospect of the major championship floodgates opening. These great expectations are par for the course when it comes to all things McIlroy. At least now, though, he can march on free from the kind of burden on his shoulders that would have made the legs of Atlas buckle. It's 20 years now since a teenage McIlroy was left out of the GB&I Walker Cup team, despite being a rising star tipped for the very top. He was already playing in European Tour events on invitations, and as a result missed a number of big amateur championships which were a key part of the selection process. Peter McAvoy, the decorated amateur and celebrated former Walker Cup captain, was on the selection committee for the 2005 match and wrestled with the decision. "Are we doing the right thing here?" he once said. "We're leaving out Rory, and I think we all know what he's going to be." In a poignant twist, McAvoy passed away last week in the lead up to the Masters. He never got to see McIlroy, a talent he always championed, fulfill his destiny. The green jacket is finally hanging in McIlroy's wardrobe. "What are we all going to talk about next year?" joked the new champion, as he put an end to the will he won't he Masters narrative that had become an annual rite of spring. "I'm sure Rory will keep giving us plenty to chew over." That article was by Nick Roger.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 14th of April 2025, from the Voices section. Chancellor's cuts to Social Security pose a devolution dilemma. Article written by Alan Folds. Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer, announced big changes when she delivered the UK government's spring statement. Compared to the budget last autumn, a weaker economic and financial position required further adjustments, she said. The Chancellor chose to make a large part of these, approximately 1/3, from changes to eligibility for the Personal Independence Payment, PIP, ultimately designed to save £5 billion. From 2026 to 27, PIP claimants must score 4 points in at least one activity area to qualify for the daily living component. In the longer term, they will also scrap the Work Capability Assessment, WCA. Eligibility for the health element of Universal Credit, UC, will instead be determined via the PIP assessment, an unhelpful conflation of two very different things: support for the additional costs of disability, PIP, and out-of-work income replacement payments, UC health element. This is even though just weeks ago the UN Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights published their concluding remarks following a review of the UK's progress on these rights. They called on the UK government to take all measures necessary to reverse the adverse impact of austerity measures, including on social security. These proposals fly in the face of this recommendation. The Alliance have already raised our deep concern about these changes. The human impact of these cuts will be severe. Earlier this year, I attended a joint meeting of the Scottish Parliament cross-party groups on disability and poverty. These proposals hadn't yet formally been made, but speculation in the media had made clear they were on the table. A speaker from the Black Triangle campaign expressed his anger that disabled people, already exhausted, fearful and under-supported following previous cuts, were having to fight further cuts to essential payments even with the change in UK government. Beyond the very real risk to the health and well-being of disabled people and people living with long-term conditions, there's an enormous issue it appears the UK government simply have not considered at all: devolution. Social security is no longer the sole preserve of the UK government's Department for Work and Pensions, DWP, but a shared competency with the Scottish Government and Social Security Scotland. Payments devolved to Scotland specifically include disability and carer payments. Here in Scotland, the process of replacing PIP with Adult Disability Payment, ADP, is at an advanced stage. Although retaining the same fundamental eligibility criteria, ADP takes a different approach from PIP with a less intrusive application process, lighter touch reviews, and an explicit commitment to maximise uptake. The Alliance, amongst many other organisations, have welcomed these changes as an essential step towards a fully human rights-based social security system. However, this raises questions about what the Chancellor's statement means in practice for Scotland. Firstly, given universal credit is reserved but PIP is devolved and is being replaced with ADP, how will the DWP determine eligibility for the universal credit health element in Scotland? PIP assessments are no longer carried out here, so those cannot be used. Will it simply accept entitlement to ADP instead? Or will it decide that process differs too much from PIP and effectively reinstitute PIP assessments in Scotland, but for universal credit health element purposes only? Secondly, how much resource will these changes take out of the Scottish budget? When the UK government reduces spending on something that is devolved, the funding available to the Scottish government for that area also reduces. That does not inherently require the Scottish government to replicate the exact same cuts or increases in spending, but it will require some form of budget response, as we saw last year with the cut to winter fuel payment. Given the existing pressures in public finances in Scotland, this could deepen that crisis. Thirdly, and this follows from the previous 2 points, what does this mean for passporting, the process by which receipt of a payment grants access to other support? Will the UK government continue to recognise ADP as an equivalent payment for passporting purposes if the Scottish government does not replicate the cuts to PIP? If passporting could be removed, that raises serious questions about how meaningful the devolution of social security powers truly is. It is essential that the Chancellor and UK government provide answers to these questions immediately. Devolution is now over a quarter of a century old. It has been nearly a decade since the process devolving social security powers began. It shouldn't be too much to expect these issues are thought about beforehand rather than left to puzzle through after the fact. Disabled people and people living with long-term conditions in Scotland will already be worried enough by these proposals. That nobody can explain exactly what the impact here will be, for lack of information from the UK government, will simply add to those fears. Alan Folds is Senior Policy Officer, Health and Social Care Alliance Scotland, the Alliance. The article was read to you by Elizabeth. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 14th of April 2025, from the Voices section. Scotland's future health and prosperity are closely linked. Article written by Graham Roy, Professor of Economics. Last week at the Scottish Fiscal Commission, we published our latest report examining the long-term sustainability of Scotland's public finances. The analysis spans the next 50 years and sets out some of the fiscal pressures we are likely to face. While many of these challenges are shared across the UK, Scotland's different population dynamics mean that we face them sooner and often more acutely. Among the most significant of these challenges is the twin effect of an ageing population and a history of poor health outcomes. These are not just public health concerns, they are fundamental determinants of the future strength of our economy and public finances. Healthcare is already the largest area of public spending in Scotland and will grow faster than any other part of the budget. That growth is partly driven by demand. As the population gets older, more people require care and the cost of providing it rises. Our analysis shows health spending increases sharply with age, and we are on the cusp of a demographic shift that will have profound implications. Over the next 25 years, the number of people in Scotland aged over 75 will grow rapidly. Indeed, the number of those aged 85 and over is projected to nearly double. At the same time, the number of people of traditional working age, those most likely to pay more in taxation and have better health, will decline slightly. These trends are not new, but their scale and pace are striking. Compared to the rest of the UK, Scotland is projected to age earlier. This matters because the funding the Scottish Government receives via the Barnett formula is based on population share, not the age profile of that population. So while we will have a relatively higher share of those who need care and support, funding won't necessarily rise in line with that need. But while the ageing of our population is largely inevitable, the health outcomes of that population are not, and this is where there is opportunity for change. Our report highlights a worrying decline in Scotland's public health. Life expectancy has stalled over the last decade, and healthy life expectancy, the years people expect to live in good health, has fallen. Mental well-being too is worsening, with a 2022 survey showing the lowest levels of self-reported well-being since data collection began. These are troubling trends with wide-ranging consequences. Health inequalities are particularly stark. In the most deprived areas of Scotland, life expectancy is 12 years lower than in the least deprived, and the gap in healthy life expectancy is 24 years. Poor health not only places pressure on services, it also limits participation in the labour market and reduces productivity. In contrast, a healthier population is more able to work, contribute and thrive economically, socially and culturally. We explored what different health futures might mean for Scotland's public finances. In a scenario where Scotland closes the gap in life expectancy with the rest of the UK, and those extra years are lived in good health, Scotland's finances improve significantly. The pressure on health and social care spending eases, and tax revenues are higher thanks to greater labour market participation. Conversely, if recent declines in health continue, the fiscal outlook worsens considerably. What does this mean for policymakers? First, it underscores the importance of seeing investment in public health not just as a social good, but as a central part of any economic strategy. Improving the nation's health is not only good for people's well-being, it is essential for the long-term sustainability of public services. Second, it points to the fiscal payoff from prevention. Investing in mental health, tackling health inequalities, supporting healthier behaviours, and improving the conditions in which people live and work all have the potential to reduce future demand for health and care services. The fiscal challenges ahead are real, and they will require difficult choices. But there are also opportunities. By improving population health, we can help manage at least some of the costs of an ageing society and strengthen the foundations of our economy. Scotland's future health and prosperity are closely linked. Investing in one is an investment in the other. Graham Roy is Professor of Economics at the University of Glasgow's Adam Smith Business School. The article was read to you by Elizabeth.
From Herald Scotland, 10th of April 2025, from the STEM section of the business section. Computer model that thinks like a missing person developed. Article by Craig Williams. A new method of predicting where people lost in the wilderness may be found based on simulations of their decision-making processes could help mountain rescue teams save lives in the future. Researchers from the University of Glasgow have developed a sophisticated computer system to model the actions of simulated people lost in outdoor environments. The system, which is based on data drawn from accounts of how people in the real world behaved after finding themselves lost outdoors, creates a heat map showing the probability of where missing people may be found in any landscape. The Glasgow team hope it could lead to the development of a robust new method to help search and rescue teams choose where to focus their recovery efforts, which could incorporate sensor-equipped drones to help scour the landscape. In a new early access paper published in the journal IEEE Access, the team outline how they use data from historic studies of how lost people behaved in real-world situations to create simulated agents who act based on different psychological states. The algorithms which underpin the agents are guided by distinct sub-models, each with a different goal in mind. They all seek to find their way back to civilization by heading for either water, trees, buildings, paths, or roads. The simulated agents make decisions about where to go, based on factors including their current location and whether they can see their preferred terrain. To help inform the agent's behaviour, The team's system also took into account data gathered on missing people's likelihood of being found in different types of terrain and the distances people typically travelled from the reported last known location. Jan Hendrik Oers of the University of Glasgow's James Watt School of Engineering is the lead researcher on the project and corresponding author on the paper. He said, "Search and rescue teams perform vitally important life-saving work, despite being frequently underfunded and often being crewed by volunteers. I grew up in the rural Highlands and I'm a keen hill walker, so I'm very conscious of both how dangerous hiking can be and what incredible work search and rescue teams do. Initially, as part of my PhD, I set out to see whether it would be possible to use machine learning to train a new type of search and rescue system to predict where lost hikers might be found. However, machine learning requires a vast amount of information to draw its conclusions. The limited resources of search teams mean they are rightly more focused on saving lives than capturing data on every aspect of their search missions, so there wasn't enough information available for us to make that approach work. That led my colleagues and I to consider whether we could tap into existing research on the behaviour of missing people, which aims to understand their choices about where they went and why. Using that as the basis for these simulated agents has given us some really encouraging results. The team validated their model by setting their AI agents loose from locations dotted across a digital recreation of Isle of Arran. The probability distribution map of the simulated lost people's locations across the island correlated strongly with the places the research the team based their model on suggested they were most likely to be found. The results suggest the behaviour of the agents is an accurate reflection of lost people's behaviour. The research is part of ongoing efforts at the University of Glasgow to use cutting-edge technology to bolster the work of search and rescue teams. Related research has used a data-driven approach to explore ways of making AI-controlled drones better at searching the countryside for missing people. Dr. David Anderson of the James Watt School of Engineering is a co-author on the paper, and Jan Hendrik Oers, PhD supervisor. He said, "One of the advantages of this kind of psychological modelling approach to locating missing people is that it could potentially be applied to any landscape. That means it could help search and rescue teams around the world, no matter if they're working in the mountains, jungles, or deserts. We're keen to explore the possibility of applying this technique to our ongoing efforts to realise the full potential of drones for search and rescue missions. Further development work and validation will be required before it could be used in real-world situations, but this is a promising early demonstration of the effectiveness of this kind of modelling and mapping." And that article was written by Craig Williams.
The Herald on the 15th of April and the news section. For Women Scotland, politicians scared of winning legal case by Rebecca McCurdy. Politicians hope for Women Scotland wins a landmark case on the definition of a woman to avoid a messy battle with campaigners, it's been claimed. Susan Smith, the director of the Gender Critical Feminist Organisation, warned that their fight will not go away even if the judgment goes against them. The UK Supreme Court will deliver its judgment over the long-running row between campaigners and the Scottish Government. For Women Scotland argue that sex-based protections must only apply to biological women, while the Scottish Government states transgender people with a Gender Recognition Certificate, GRC, should also be included. Regardless of the outcome, the consequences will be wide-ranging, with potentially significant ramifications on UK-wide equality legislation. Ms Smith told the Herald, "If we lose, we will be on the doorstep of all the politicians saying you have to sort this out. You can't go on like this. It becomes a political fight. I'm not sure if it's a political fight the politicians really want. I think for a lot of them it would be much simpler if we won, and then it's all out of their hands and it's all really easy. If we lost, they are going to have to deal with this, and there will be a lot more people who want the law changed the other way to turn it into self-ID law. It's going to be messy." The row dates back to 2018 after the Scottish Government's Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Bill passed through Holyrood. It aimed to ensure that at least 50% of non-executive members of Scottish public boards were women. However, it included an amendment which stated a person with the protected characteristics of gender reassignment should be included. While the Act stated that the person had to take the decision to undergo the process for the purpose of becoming a woman, it did not require the person to dress, look or behave in any particular way. The Act continued. It would be expected there would be evidence that the person was living continuously as a woman, always using female pronouns, using a female name on official documents, describing themselves and being described by others using female language. The candidate does not have to prove whether they met the definition of a woman, however. Gender critics took the case to the Court of Session in Edinburgh, arguing the legislation was beyond Holyrood's competence. The case initially failed, but campaigners won on appeal, with ministers issuing new guidance that a definition of a woman matched the Equality Act, but including a person with a GRC. An ongoing legal back and forth has landed it in London Supreme Court, with huge ramifications expected from the landmark ruling. After the European Human Rights Commission, EHRC, warned the 2010 Equality Act could now be inoperable because of interpretations from public bodies to include self-ID policies, Ms Smith said the law would have to change, even if Women Scotland lose the case. It's going to be a headache for politicians because the current government will have to go into election in the knowledge that they told everyone at the time of the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, which of course was blocked, that it would not change anything under the Equality Act. I think that this will be a difficult conversation for some of them. I think they would, again, rather have it tied up completely. If the Supreme Court rules in favour of for Women in Scotland, trans people fear the case will undermine their rights in their acquired gender. It would still give people with GRCs protection under the characteristic of gender reassignment, but not discrimination on the basis of their acquired sex. And that was by Rebecca McCurdy.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.